The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in front of the general store in Sioux Falls, Dakota Territory, sending clouds of dust swirling through the August heat of 1875. And Faith Coleman stepped down into what she prayed would be her salvation rather than her doom. Her legs trembled as her boots hit the packed earth, whether from the grueling 3-day journey or the fear coursing through her veins, she could not say. Behind her, 3 small faces peered out from the stagecoach window, watching her with the kind of trust that made her heart ache. Those children had no one else, neither did she. Miss Coleman, a portly man in a dusty suit, approached, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "I'm Harold Jenkins, the attorney who arranged your correspondence with Lucas Ingram." Faith steadied herself, smoothing down her travel-worn skirt. "Yes, Mr. Jenkins. Thank you for meeting us." His eyes widened. "Us? The children." Faith turned to help them down. First came Tommy, age 8, all knobby knees and serious brown eyes. Then Sarah, barely 6, clutching a rag doll with one arm missing. Finally, little Michael, only 4 years old, who wrapped his arms around Faith's neck the moment she lifted him. "Miss Coleman, I don't understand." Jenkins looked genuinely bewildered. "Lucas Ingram arranged for a mail-order bride. He said nothing about children." Faith's stomach clenched, but she lifted her chin. "These children lost their parents to cholera 3 months ago. They were in the orphanage in Philadelphia where I worked. When it burned down, most of the children were sent to different institutions, but I could not bear to be separated from these 3. I used what little money I had left to bring them with me." "But Lucas does not know about them," Jenkins said slowly. "No," Faith admitted. "I tried to write, but there was no time. The stagecoach was leaving, and if we did not get on it, they would have been separated. I could not let that happen." Jenkins tugged at his collar. "Miss Coleman, Lucas Ingram is not an easy man. He lives up in the mountains, miles from town. He's been alone for years, by choice. He specifically wanted a wife who could handle frontier life, not a woman with 3 children to care for." "Then perhaps he should have specified that in his advertisement," Faith said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. She had been meek all her life, always following the rules, always doing what was expected. But these children had changed her. They needed her to be strong. "Mr. Jenkins, I have traveled nearly 2,000 miles. I have exactly $3 to my name. These children need a home, and I signed a contract to marry Lucas Ingram. If he wishes to break that contract, he will have to tell me himself." The attorney studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "He is coming down from his cabin tomorrow morning to meet you and make the arrangements. I suggest you get a room at the boarding house and pray he is feeling charitable." Faith spent a restless night in a cramped room at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, the children tucked into one narrow bed while she sat in a chair by the window, watching the stars. She had gambled everything on this journey. Back in Philadelphia, she had been alone after her father's death left her penniless. The orphanage had provided work and shelter, but barely enough to survive. When it burned, she found herself with nothing again except these 3 children who had stolen her heart. Lucas Ingram's advertisement had seemed like divine providence. Seeking capable woman for marriage. Must be strong, practical, and willing to live in remote mountain location. No frills or false expectations. It was not romantic, but Faith had stopped believing in romance long ago. She needed security. The children needed a home. It had seemed like a fair trade. Now, watching Tommy sleep with his arm protectively around Sarah while Michael curled between them, she wondered if she had been foolish to hope. Morning came too quickly. Faith dressed in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that she had mended twice, and braided her long auburn hair. She helped the children wash and dress, Then they all went downstairs for breakfast. "Lucas Ingram just rode into town," Mrs. Patterson announced, peering out the window. "Goodness, I forgot how big that man is." Faith's heart hammered against her ribs. She stood, smoothing her skirt with damp palms. "Children, please stay here and finish your breakfast. I will return shortly." "But Miss Faith," Tommy started. "Stay here," she repeated gently but firmly. "I need to speak with Mr. Ingram first." She stepped out onto the wooden boardwalk and immediately understood what Mrs. Patterson meant. Lucas Ingram was not merely tall. He was massive, well over 6 feet, with shoulders so broad they blocked out the sun. His hair, dark brown and slightly too long, brushed his collar, and his jaw was covered with several days' worth of dark stubble. He wore buckskin pants and a worn flannel shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful muscles of his arms and chest. He looked like he had been carved from the mountains themselves. Jenkins hurried over to greet him, and Faith watched as the attorney spoke in low, urgent tones. She saw Lucas's jaw tighten, saw his eyes sweep toward the boarding house and land on her. His eyes were green, she realized, bright as jade in his tanned face. And they were not pleased. He strode toward her with the kind of purposeful gait that made her want to step back, but she held her ground. When he reached the boardwalk, he stopped, crossing his arms over his chest. "You are Faith Coleman." It was not a question. "I am. You are Lucas Ingram. I arranged for a bride, not a nursemaid with a ready-made family." His voice was deep, roughened by years of living alone in the wilderness, and there was anger in it. But beneath the anger, Faith detected something else. Uncertainty, perhaps. Fear, even. "I brought 3 children with me," Faith said, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "They are orphans. They have no one else. I could not leave them behind. You should have told me." "Would you have agreed to the arrangement if I had?" His silence was answer enough. Faith took a deep breath. "Mr. Ingram, I understand this is not what you expected, but I have come a very long way and I have nowhere else to go. These children need a home. I can work hard. I can cook, clean, tend a garden. I can help with any livestock you have. I do not expect luxury or comfort. I only ask for shelter and safety for these 3 innocent children." "I live in a 2-room cabin," Lucas said flatly. "I hunt and trap for my living. I am alone for weeks at a time. It is no place for children." "With respect, Mr. Ingram, any place can be a home for children if there is love and care. They have lived through the loss of their parents and the horror of a fire that killed many of their friends. They are strong, resilient children. They will adapt." Lucas looked past her toward the boarding house window, where 3 small faces pressed against the glass. Faith saw something flicker across his hard features, too quick to identify. "I cannot do this," he said finally. "I will give you money for the return journey." Desperation clawed at Faith's throat. "The contract, to hell with the contract," Lucas said, but without real heat. "I am not the man to raise children. I know nothing about it. I barely know how to live with another adult, let alone 3 young ones." "Then we will learn together," Faith said quietly. "Mr. Ingram, please, just give us a chance, 1 month. If after 1 month you truly cannot bear to have us there, I will take the children and find another solution. I give you my word." "What other solution?" Lucas asked, and there was something almost gentle in the question. "Jenkins told me you have no money and no family. I will find work somewhere. I will manage. I always have." Lucas studied her for a long moment, and Faith had the unsettling feeling that he could see straight through her brave words to the terrified woman beneath. "1 month," he said finally, "but I am making no promises beyond that. My cabin is small. Life in the mountains is hard. If you cannot handle it, or if those children cannot adapt, I am bringing you all back to town." Relief flooded through Faith so powerfully she felt dizzy. "Thank you, Mr. Ingram. You will not regret this." "I already do," he muttered, but he turned toward the boarding house. "Let me meet them, at least." Faith led him inside, where the children still sat at the table, their eyes wide. Tommy immediately moved to stand in front of the younger two, protective and wary. "Children, this is Lucas Ingram," Faith said softly. "He has agreed to let us stay with him for a time." Lucas looked down at them, and Faith saw his expression soften just slightly. "You are Tommy," the boy nodded. "You look after your brother and sister." "Yes, sir." "That is good. A man should protect his family." Lucas shifted his attention to Sarah. "And you are Sarah?" "Yes, sir," she whispered, clutching her doll. "That is a fine doll you have there. Her name is Molly. She lost her arm in the fire." Something painful crossed Lucas's face. Sometimes things get broken, but they are still worth keeping. Then he looked at Michael, who stared up at him with enormous blue eyes. "And you must be Michael." The little boy nodded but did not speak. "Are you scared of me?" Lucas asked. Michael nodded again. "That is all right. I suppose I am pretty big and rough looking. But I promise I will not hurt you, any of you." He straightened, looking at Faith. "We leave in an hour. I need to get supplies from the general store. Dress warm. The nights get cold in the mountains, even in August." Faith spent the next hour in a flurry of activity, gathering their few belongings and accepting donations from Mrs. Patterson, who took pity on them and provided 2 quilts and a basket of food. Lucas returned with a wagon loaded with supplies, and Faith noticed he had purchased 4 thick wool blankets, a sack of flour, salt pork, dried beans, and other staples. He had also bought Sarah a new doll. "Her old one looked lonely," he said gruffly when Faith stared at him in surprise. "Thought she might want a companion." Sarah clutched both dolls to her chest, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Call me Lucas," he said, then cleared his throat. "All of you, no need for formalities where we are going." The journey into the mountains took most of the day. The wagon followed a rough trail that climbed steadily upward, winding through forests of pine and aspen. Faith held Michael on her lap while Tommy and Sarah sat in the back, surrounded by supplies and blankets. Lucas drove in silence, his eyes constantly scanning the landscape. As the afternoon wore on, Faith found herself stealing glances at him. His profile was strong, almost harsh in its masculinity, with a straight nose and a stubborn jaw. His hands on the reins were large and calloused, the hands of a man who worked hard for everything he had. Despite his initial resistance, he had been kinder than she expected. The dolls for Sarah, the blankets, the way he had spoken to Tommy with respect rather than condescension. "How long have you lived in the mountains?" she asked finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. 8 years. "You came here after the war," his jaw tightened. "Yes." Faith recognized the closed expression on his face. Many men had that look when speaking of the war. Her own father had worn it until the day he died. "It must be beautiful here in winter." "It is also deadly if you are not prepared," Lucas said. "The snow can be 10 feet deep. The temperature drops so low it can kill you in minutes if you are caught outside. There are wolves, mountain lions, bears. It is not Philadelphia, Miss Coleman." "Faith," she said softly. "If I am to call you Lucas, you should call me Faith." He glanced at her, and for a moment, something unreadable flickered in those green eyes. "Faith," he repeated, and the way he said her name sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. They reached the cabin as the sun began to sink behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lucas had not exaggerated about its size. It was indeed small, built of sturdy logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. But it sat in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, with a stream running nearby and a view of the valley below that took Faith's breath away. "It is beautiful," she whispered, Lucas studied her face as if trying to determine whether she meant it. "It is isolated." "It is peaceful," Faith corrected. She climbed down from the wagon, then helped the children down. Tommy immediately began exploring the clearing while Sarah held tight to Faith's hand. Michael, exhausted from the journey, rested his head on Faith's shoulder. Lucas began unloading supplies. "There is a lean-to stable for the horses around back. A chicken coop, though I only have 4 hens right now. A root cellar for storage. The stream provides water and it is full of fish. I hunt deer, elk, and turkey. There is a garden plot, but I have not kept it up these last few years." "I can tend a garden," Faith said. "My mother taught me before she died." Lucas carried a heavy sack of flour as if it weighed nothing, and Faith found herself noticing again the sheer strength of him. He moved with the easy confidence of a man completely comfortable in his own body, in his own environment. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. The main room held a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a cupboard for dishes, and a rocking chair. A ladder led to a loft above. Through an open doorway, Faith could see a small bedroom with a single bed. "I will sleep in the loft," Lucas said, following her gaze. "You and the children can have the bedroom. I will build more beds tomorrow." "You do not have to give up your room," Faith protested. "Yes, I do," Lucas said simply. "You are a woman and they are children. I will not have you sleeping on the floor." He continued bringing in supplies while Faith explored the cabin more thoroughly. It was remarkably tidy for a bachelor's home, though clearly built for function rather than comfort. There were no curtains on the windows, no rugs on the floor, no decorative touches of any kind. It was shelter, nothing more, but it could be a home, Faith thought. With time and effort, it could be a real home. Lucas built a fire and showed Faith where everything was stored while the children sat quietly at the table, overwhelmed by the strangeness of their new surroundings. He pulled out salt pork and beans, but Faith gently shooed him aside. "Let me cook," she said. "You have done enough for today." He looked like he wanted to argue, then nodded and went back outside. Through the window, Faith watched him care for the horses with the same efficient competence he showed in everything else. She prepared a simple meal from the supplies Mrs. Patterson had provided, stretching the food to feed 5 instead of 4. When Lucas came back inside, the table was set with bowls of stew and thick slices of bread. He stopped in the doorway, staring at the table as if he had never seen such a thing before. "It is nothing fancy," Faith said quickly, worried he was displeased, "but it should be filling." "I have not sat down to a meal like this in 8 years, Lucas said quietly. He pulled out a chair and sat, looking almost uncomfortable at his own table. The children took their seats and Faith served everyone before sitting down herself. "We should say grace," Tommy said suddenly. Faith nodded and they all bowed their heads. Tommy led them in a simple prayer of thanks, his young voice steady and clear. When Faith looked up, she saw Lucas watching them with an expression she could not quite decipher. They ate in relative silence, exhaustion catching up with all of them. Sarah could barely keep her eyes open, and Michael fell asleep in his chair. Lucas carried the little boy to the bedroom without being asked, laying him gently on the bed. "I need to make that bigger," he said, frowning at the narrow bed, "and build at least 2 more. "We can manage for tonight," Faith said. "Thank you, Lucas, for everything." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Faith felt something shift in the air between them. "You are not what I expected," he said finally. "Neither are you." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile but close. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Faith settled the children in the bedroom, all 3 of them tucked into Lucas's bed with the quilts and blankets piled high. She sat beside them until they fell asleep, then returned to the main room. Lucas sat in the rocking chair by the fire, staring into the flames. He had removed his boots and his long legs were stretched out before him. In the firelight he looked younger than Faith had initially thought, perhaps only in his early 30s. "How old are you?" she asked, then immediately felt her face flush. "I am sorry. That was forward of me." 32, Lucas said. "You?" 24, he nodded slowly. "You are young to have taken on 3 children." "I am old enough to know they need love and stability," Faith said quietly. She sat in one of the chairs at the table, suddenly aware of how alone they were. "Thank you for giving us this chance, Lucas. I know it is not what you wanted." "No," he admitted, "it is not." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "But when I saw you standing there this morning with your chin up and your eyes blazing, telling Jenkins you were not leaving those children behind, I thought maybe I had been wrong about what I wanted." Faith's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Lucas stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark forest. "I have been alone for a long time. I thought that was what I needed. After the war, after everything I saw and did, I could not stand to be around people. The noise, the crowds, the questions. I came here to escape all of that." "Why did you advertise for a wife then?" "Loneliness," he said simply. "The kind that eats at you in the dark, the kind that makes you forget why you are even living." He turned to face her. "I thought a wife would fill that emptiness, someone to share the work, the days, the nights. I never thought about children, never wanted them. I figured I was too hard, too broken to be anyone's father." "You are not broken," Faith said softly. "You do not know me well enough to make that judgment. Perhaps not. But I saw how you looked at Sarah when you gave her that doll. I saw how you spoke to Tommy, treating him like a man worthy of respect. I saw how gently you carried Michael to bed. A truly broken man would not do those things." Lucas shook his head, but she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. "I do not know how to do this, Faith. Any of this. Being a husband, a father figure. I have lived like an animal for 8 years, concerned only with survival." Faith stood and crossed to him. Up close, he was even more imposing, his shoulders so broad she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. But she was not afraid. "Then we will learn together," she said. "Neither of us knows what we are doing. We are both frightened and uncertain, but those children need us, Lucas, and perhaps we need them too." For a long moment he simply looked at her, and Faith felt something pass between them, some unspoken understanding. Then he nodded. "1 month," he said. "We will see how it goes." 1 month, Faith agreed. The first week was harder than Faith had anticipated. Lucas woke before dawn each day and worked until long after dark, and Faith scrambled to keep up with the demands of frontier life. Water had to be hauled from the stream, clothes washed by hand and hung on lines between the trees. The garden plot needed to be cleared and replanted, though it was late in the season. The chickens needed tending, eggs collected, meals prepared. The children, resilient as they were, struggled with the adjustment. Sarah had nightmares about the fire and would wake screaming. Michael clung to Faith's skirts, afraid to let her out of his sight. Only Tommy adapted quickly, following Lucas everywhere, watching everything the mountain man did with eager attention. Lucas built 3 beds in the span of 2 days, working late into the night by lantern light. He fashioned them from logs he cut himself, fitting them together with such precision they did not even creak. He built a larger bed for the bedroom and 2 smaller ones for the loft. "The boys can sleep up there," he said. "Sarah should stay with you." "Where will you sleep?" Faith asked. "I will figure something out." But Faith noticed he spent most nights in the rocking chair by the fire, dozing fitfully, always alert to every sound. She suspected he had done the same even before they arrived, that sleep did not come easily to him. One night, about a week after their arrival, Sarah woke screaming from another nightmare. Faith held her and soothed her, but the little girl could not be calmed. Her cries woke Michael and Tommy, and soon all three children were awake and crying. Faith felt helpless, overwhelmed. She had never had to comfort all three at once, and nothing she did seemed to help. Then Lucas appeared in the doorway, his hair disheveled from sleep, his chest bare. Faith tried not to stare at the expanse of muscle and scars that covered his torso, but it was impossible to ignore the sheer physical power of him. "What do they need?" he asked simply. "I do not know," Faith admitted, near tears herself. "Sarah had a nightmare, and now they are all upset and I cannot calm them." Lucas stepped into the room and, to Faith's surprise, sat on the floor. "Come here," he said to the children. "All of you." Tommy came first, then Michael. Sarah hesitated, but when Lucas held out his hand, she slowly approached. "You want to know a secret?" Lucas said, his deep voice soft. "I have nightmares too, almost every night, about things that happened in the war, things I saw and did. And when I wake up scared, you know what I do?" Sarah shook her head. "I listen to the sounds of the forest, the wind in the trees, the stream running over the rocks, the owls calling to each other. I remind myself that I am here in this beautiful place, and the bad things are in the past. They cannot hurt me anymore." "But the fire was real," Sarah whispered. "It hurt." "I know, little one, but it is over now. You are safe here. These walls are thick. This chimney is well built. And I promise you, I will never let anything hurt you or your brothers or Faith. That is a promise I will keep as long as I am breathing." Something in his voice, the absolute certainty of it, seemed to reach the children. Sarah climbed onto his lap and Michael followed. Tommy sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder. Lucas wrapped his arms around all three of them, holding them close. Faith watched, her throat tight with emotion. This man who claimed to be broken, who said he knew nothing about children, held them with such gentleness and spoke to them with such honesty that her heart ached. "Tell us about the forest," Tommy said quietly. "About the animals." And Lucas did. He told them about the elk that came down from the high peaks in winter, their antlers like small trees, about the eagles that nested in the tallest pines and hunted fish from the streams, about the way snow blanketed everything in silence, making the whole world look clean and new. He spoke in that deep, rough voice until all three children's eyes grew heavy and they slumped against him, finally at peace. Carefully, Lucas stood, carrying Michael and Sarah while Tommy walked beside him. He tucked them all back into bed, pulling the quilts up to their chins. Then he turned to Faith. "You should rest too," he said softly. "Thank you," Faith whispered. "That was remarkable." Lucas shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "They just needed to know they were safe." "They needed you," Faith corrected. She reached out almost without thinking and placed her hand on his bare arm. His skin was warm, the muscle beneath hard as stone. "I needed you too." Lucas looked down at her hand on his arm, then at her face. Something sparked in his green eyes, something that made Faith's pulse quicken. For a moment, she thought he might say something, do something. Then he stepped back, breaking the contact. "Good night, Faith." "Good night, Lucas." But as she lay in bed that night, listening to the children's soft breathing and the crackle of the fire in the other room, Faith knew something had changed between her and Lucas. Something had begun to grow, fragile as a seedling but undeniably real. The days began to take on a rhythm. Lucas hunted and trapped while Tommy shadowed him whenever possible, learning to track deer and set snares. Faith tended the garden and the chickens, with Sarah as her constant companion. Michael gradually grew braver, venturing farther from Faith's side to explore the clearing and play in the stream under her watchful eye. Lucas proved to be an excellent teacher, patient and thorough. He showed Tommy how to read signs in the forest, how to move quietly, how to respect the animals they hunted. He taught Faith how to shoot, insisting she needed to protect herself and the children if he was away. "Hold it steady," he said, standing behind her as she aimed the rifle at a target he had set up. "Breathe in, then let half the breath out and hold. Squeeze the trigger slowly." Faith was intensely aware of his presence, his chest nearly touching her back, his arms on either side of her as he adjusted her grip. His breath stirred her hair, and she found it difficult to concentrate. "Focus," Lucas said, his voice low. Faith squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder and the bullet hit the edge of the target. "Good," Lucas said. "Try again." By the end of the afternoon, Faith could hit the center of the target 3 times out of 5. Lucas seemed pleased, though he rarely smiled. That evening, as Faith prepared supper, Tommy burst into the cabin, his eyes shining with excitement. "Faith, Faith, Lucas showed me how to fish and I caught 3 big ones." Lucas followed more slowly, carrying the fish. "He is a natural," he said, and there was unmistakable pride in his voice. "Better than I was at his age." Tommy beamed, standing taller. For the first time since losing his parents, he looked truly happy. Faith cleaned and cooked the fish, and they had a feast that night. Even little Michael ate heartily, chattering about the tadpoles he had found in the stream. Sarah showed them a flower crown she had made, and Lucas solemnly allowed her to place it on his head, which made all the children dissolve into giggles. Watching Lucas sit at the table with a crown of wildflowers in his dark hair, his stern face softening as he listened to Michael's rambling story, Faith felt something bloom in her chest. It was more than gratitude, more than respect. It was the beginning of something deeper, something that both thrilled and terrified her. After the children went to bed, Lucas sat on the porch steps, staring up at the stars. Faith brought him a cup of coffee and sat beside him. "Thank you for being so good with Tommy," she said. "He needs a man in his life, someone to look up to." "He is a good boy," Lucas said. "They all are. You have done well with them." "I have only known them since March," Faith admitted. "When their parents died, I volunteered to care for them at the orphanage because no one else wanted 3 children together. Most people only want babies or very young children, but I could not stand to see them separated. They had already lost so much." "What about you?" Lucas asked. "You said your father died. What happened to your mother?" "She died when I was 12. Influenza. My father never recovered from losing her. He tried for my sake, but his heart was broken. He died 2 years ago, also from influenza." I had nothing left except a few personal items and my mother's recipes. The job at the orphanage was all I could find. No suitors. A woman like you. Faith felt her cheeks warm. "A few men called on me when I was younger, but my father was very protective. After he died, I was too busy surviving to think about courtship. And then the fire happened and I saw your advertisement and it seemed like fate." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "I am glad you answered it," he said finally. "Even with the children. Especially with the children." Faith looked at him in surprise. "Truly, this cabin has been empty for a long time," Lucas said. "I have been empty for a long time. I did not realize how much until you all arrived and filled it with noise and laughter and life." He turned to face her, and in the moonlight his eyes were soft. "You asked me why I advertised for a wife. The truth is I was dying inside, slowly, bit by bit. I thought maybe having someone to share this place with would make me feel alive again." "And does it?" Faith asked softly. "Yes," Lucas said. "More than I expected, more than I deserve." Faith reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, large and warm and calloused. "You deserve happiness, Lucas. You deserve a family if you want one." "I have never had a family," Lucas said. "Not a real one. My father drank himself to death when I was young." My mother died trying to birth my sister, and the baby died too. I grew up alone, working odd jobs, barely surviving. The army gave me purpose for a while, but then the war ended and I had nothing again. You have something now, Faith said, if you want it. Lucas lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that Faith's breath caught. I want it, he said. More than I have wanted anything in a very long time. The month passed more quickly than Faith could have imagined. Summer faded into early autumn, and the aspens began to turn gold. Faith worked hard to prepare for winter, canning vegetables from the garden, drying herbs, helping Lucas smoke meat and fish. The children thrived, growing stronger and healthier with each passing day. Lucas had not mentioned the end of the trial month, and neither had Faith. They had fallen into a comfortable routine, almost like a real family. Almost, but not quite, because they still had not married. They still slept in separate rooms. They were still, in many ways, strangers learning to live together. But Faith's feelings were no longer those of a stranger. She had fallen in love with Lucas. She realized one crisp September morning as she watched him teach Tommy to chop wood. She loved his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness with the children, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching. She loved the sound of his rare laughter, the competence of his hands, the way he made her feel safe and cherished even when he never said the words. The question was whether Lucas felt the same. He was unfailingly kind to her, respectful, even affectionate in small ways. But he had never tried to kiss her, never spoken of love or marriage beyond the original arrangement. Faith did not know if his feelings went deeper than gratitude and companionship. One evening in late September, after the children were asleep, Lucas asked Faith to walk with him. They followed the stream away from the cabin, the moonlight bright enough to see by. The air was cool and crisp, smelling of pine and fallen leaves. "The month is over," Lucas said finally. Faith's heart sank. "I know. I should have brought you back to town already if I was going to. That was the agreement." "Yes." Lucas stopped walking and turned to face her. "I do not want you to go, Faith, any of you. I want you to stay here, not as a trial, but as my family, my real family." Joy burst through Faith's chest like sunshine. "Truly, I should have asked this properly weeks ago, but I am not good with words. I am not romantic or refined. I am just a man who has spent too long alone and who finally understands what he has been missing." Lucas took both her hands in his. "Faith Coleman, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, not because of some advertisement or contract, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you?" Tears streamed down Faith's face. "You love me. How could I not?" Lucas said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the strongest, bravest, kindest woman I have ever known. You brought light into my darkness. You gave me a reason to be better than I was. You made me believe I could be a husband and a father, that I could have a real home instead of just a place to survive. I love you, Faith. I love you so much it terrifies me." Faith threw her arms around his neck and Lucas caught her, lifting her off her feet. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Lucas. I love you too. I have loved you for weeks now, but I was afraid to say it, afraid you only saw me as an obligation." Lucas set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "You are not an obligation. You are a blessing I never expected and do not deserve." Then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid of frightening her. But when Faith responded, pressing closer, Lucas deepened the kiss. His arms came around her, holding her tight against his powerful body, and Faith felt safe and desired and loved in a way she had never experienced. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. We will go to town tomorrow, find a preacher, do this properly. Can we bring the children? Faith asked. They should be part of this. Of course, Lucas said. They are part of this. They are part of us. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, and for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, Faith felt like she had truly come home. They traveled to Sioux Falls the next day, all 5 of them crowded into the wagon. The children were excited, chattering about going to town, but they grew quiet when Lucas pulled up in front of the small church. "Are you getting married?" Tommy asked, his eyes wide. "Yes," Faith said, "if that is all right with you." Tommy looked at Lucas, then at Faith. "Does that mean Lucas will be our father?" Lucas climbed down from the wagon and crouched in front of the boy. "I will never replace your real father, Tommy, but if you will let me, I would be honored to take care of you and your brother and sister. To teach you and protect you and love you as if you were my own." Tommy thought about this for a moment, then nodded solemnly. "I would like that." "Me too," Sarah said shyly. Michael just reached out and hugged Lucas around the neck, which seemed to be answer enough. The preacher was an elderly man named Reverend Morrison who had known Lucas for years. He was delighted to perform the ceremony, and within an hour, Faith and Lucas stood before him, the children gathered around them. Faith wore the same blue dress she had worn the day she arrived, but Lucas had surprised her with a bouquet of wildflowers he had picked that morning. His hands were steady as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, a ring he had purchased from the general store. "I, Lucas Ingram, take you, Faith Coleman, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." Faith's voice was clear and strong as she repeated the same vows, meaning every word with her whole heart. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Morrison said with a smile. Lucas kissed her softly, sweetly, mindful of the children watching. But the love in his eyes told Faith everything she needed to know. They spent the rest of the day in town, Lucas buying supplies for winter and treats for the children. They ate lunch at the boarding house, where Mrs. Patterson fussed over them and declared it the most romantic thing she had ever seen. Even Harold Jenkins congratulated them, looking relieved that his gamble in arranging the mail-order bride match had worked out. As the sun began to set, they headed back to the mountains, the wagon loaded with supplies and the children drowsy and content. Lucas drove with one hand, holding Faith's with the other. "I never thought I would have this," he said quietly. "A wife, children, a real family." "Neither did I," Faith admitted. "When I stepped off that stagecoach, I was terrified you would send us away. I had no backup plan, no safety net. I was betting everything on your kindness." "You were brave," Lucas said. "Braver than any soldier I knew in the war. You came across a continent with 3 orphan children, with no money and no guarantee of anything, because you believed they deserved a home." "They do deserve it," Faith said. "Every child deserves to be loved and safe." "So do you," Lucas said, squeezing her hand. "And I promise you, Faith, for the rest of my life, I will make sure you know how loved you are." That night, after the children were asleep, Faith and Lucas stood together on the porch of their cabin, looking out at the moonlit forest. "Are you happy?" Lucas asked. Faith turned to him, this strong, gentle man who had opened his home and his heart to her and 3 children he had never met. "I am happier than I ever thought possible." Lucas pulled her into his arms, and Faith rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Above them, the stars blazed in the clear mountain sky, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called to its mate. Winter arrived early that year, with the first snow falling in October. Lucas had prepared well, and the cabin was snug and warm. He had enlarged the woodpile until it was big enough to last through even the hardest winter, and Faith had preserved enough food to see them through to spring. The children adapted beautifully to their new life. Tommy grew taller and stronger, working alongside Lucas every day, learning everything the mountain man could teach him. Sarah blossomed with the stability and love, her nightmares fading as she grew more secure. Michael, who had been so fearful and clingy at first, became adventurous and bold, constantly exploring and getting into mischief. Faith discovered she was pregnant in November. She had suspected for a few weeks, but waited to be certain before telling Lucas. One evening, after the children were in bed, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is going to be another addition to our family," she said softly. Lucas stared at her, his green eyes wide with shock. "You are certain?" "Yes." The baby should arrive in late spring or early summer. Lucas swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Faith asked, laughing at his exuberance. "Happy does not begin to describe it," Lucas said. He set her down gently, his hand moving to her stomach with such tenderness it made Faith's eyes sting. "I never dared dream of this. A wife I love, children who call me father, and now a baby. It is more than I ever deserved." "You deserve all of it," Faith said firmly. "You are a good man, Lucas Ingram, the best man I have ever known." They told the children the next morning over breakfast. The announcement was met with excitement and questions. Would it be a boy or a girl? Could they help take care of the baby? What would they name it? "We have months to decide all of that," Faith said, laughing. "For now, we just need to wait and prepare." Winter deepened, and the snow piled high around the cabin just as Lucas had warned it would. But inside they were warm and safe. Lucas cut a large pine tree and brought it inside, and Faith and the children decorated it with strings of dried berries and paper ornaments. On Christmas morning, Lucas gave Faith a wooden rocking chair he had built himself, perfect for nursing a baby. He had carved her name into the back, along with tiny flowers and vines. "It is beautiful," Faith whispered, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "When did you find time to make this?" "I worked on it in the lean-to stable while you were sleeping," Lucas admitted. "I wanted you to have something special." Faith gave Lucas a warm woolen scarf she had knitted herself, working on it late at night by firelight. The children gave him a carved wooden bear that Tommy had made under Faith's supervision, and Lucas declared it the finest gift he had ever received. As winter wore on, Faith's pregnancy became more apparent. Lucas grew even more protective, insisting she rest more and let him handle the heavier chores. He rubbed her aching back in the evenings and made sure she always had enough to eat, giving her the best portions at meals. "You need to eat more," he would say, piling extra food on her plate. "You are feeding too now." "I am eating plenty," Faith would protest, laughing. But she loved his attentiveness, the way he worried over her health, the way he spoke to her growing belly as if the baby could already hear him. One evening in February, a blizzard struck with such ferocity that even Lucas looked concerned. The wind howled around the cabin, driving snow so thick they could not see more than a few feet beyond the windows. The temperature dropped dangerously low, and Lucas kept the fire roaring. "Is this normal?" Faith asked, trying to hide her fear from the children. "It happens every few years," Lucas said. "We have plenty of wood and food. We will be fine as long as we stay inside." The blizzard lasted 3 days. On the second day they heard a strange sound outside, a kind of scratching and whimpering. Lucas grabbed his rifle and cautiously opened the door. A large dog stood on the porch, covered in snow and ice, shivering violently. "Please do not shoot it," Sarah cried. Lucas lowered the rifle. I am not going to shoot it. The poor thing is half frozen." He brought the dog inside, and Faith quickly prepared a warm bed by the fire. The dog was a shepherd mix, lean and scarred with intelligent eyes. They fed it scraps and melted snow for it to drink, and the dog recovered quickly. By the third day, when the blizzard finally passed, the dog had adopted them as thoroughly as they had adopted it. "Can we keep him?" Tommy asked. "Please." Lucas looked at Faith, who nodded. "We can keep him. Every homestead needs a good dog." They named him Scout, and he proved his worth within days, alerting them to predators and helping Lucas hunt. The children adored him, and he was unfailingly gentle with them, especially Sarah. Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting in patches, revealing the green grass beneath. Faith's pregnancy advanced, and Lucas grew increasingly nervous as her due date approached. "What if something goes wrong?" he asked one night, pacing the cabin. "We are so far from town, from a doctor." "Women have been having babies in remote places since the beginning of time," Faith said calmly. "I am strong and healthy. Everything will be fine." "How can you be so calm?" "Because I trust you," Faith said simply. "And I trust myself. We will manage, Lucas, we always do." The baby came on a warm June evening. Faith's labor started in the afternoon, gentle contractions that grew steadily stronger. Lucas sent Tommy to fetch water, Sarah to gather clean cloths, and Michael to play with Scout outside. Then he focused all his attention on Faith. He had helped birth foals and calves, but this was different. This was his wife, his child. His hands shook as he prepared everything they might need. "Lucas," Faith said, gripping his hand during a contraction. "I need you to be calm. I need you to be strong for me." Lucas took a deep breath and nodded. "I am here. I am with you. Tell me what you need." The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Lucas never left Faith's side, supporting her, encouraging her, wiping her face with cool cloths. When the baby finally came, slipping into Lucas's waiting hands with a lusty cry, he felt tears stream down his face. "A boy," he said, his voice breaking. "We have a son, Faith." Faith reached for the baby, exhausted but radiant, and Lucas placed the tiny, squirming bundle in her arms. The baby had dark hair like Lucas and Faith's blue eyes, and he was perfect in every way. "What should we name him?" Faith asked softly. Lucas looked down at his wife and son, overcome with emotion. "James," he said finally, "after my grandfather. He was the only person who was ever kind to me when I was young." "James Ingram," Faith said, testing the name. "I love it." The older children crowded in to meet their new brother, and Lucas watched as Tommy gently touched the baby's tiny hand, as Sarah cooed over his button nose, as Michael declared him the best baby ever. Scout sat at Lucas's feet, his tail wagging, as if he understood the significance of the moment. That night, after everyone else was asleep, Lucas sat in the rocking chair he had made for Faith, holding his son. The baby was so small in his large hands, so fragile and perfect. Lucas had held rifles and axes, had fought and killed and survived, but nothing had prepared him for the overwhelming love he felt for this tiny person. "I promise you," Lucas whispered to the sleeping baby, "that you will never be alone. You will always know you are loved. You will grow up in a home filled with warmth and laughter and safety. I will be the father to you that I never had. I will protect you and guide you and love you every day of your life." Faith watched from the bedroom doorway, her heart full. Lucas looked up and met her eyes, and she saw everything he felt reflected in his gaze. "Come to bed," she said softly. "Both of you." Lucas carried James to the bedroom and laid him in the small cradle he had built, then climbed into bed beside Faith. She curled against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For everything. for bringing life and love into this cabin, for giving me a family, for showing me that I could be more than just a man surviving in the wilderness. You made me whole, Faith, you and the children. I did not even know I was broken until you fixed me. You were never broken, Faith said. You were just waiting for us to find you. Lucas kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. The thought of losing you, of anything happening to you or the children. We are here, Faith interrupted gently. We are safe. We are together. That is all that matters. The years that followed were filled with hard work and simple joys. James grew into a sturdy toddler, followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Lily, and then another son they named Samuel. The cabin had to be expanded twice to accommodate the growing family, with Lucas building new rooms with the same care and skill he brought to everything. Tommy grew into a fine young man, as skilled at hunting and trapping as Lucas. At 19, he met a girl in town and brought her up to meet the family. Sarah, at 17, was beautiful and kind, helping Faith with the younger children and running the household with quiet efficiency. Michael, at 15, was already taller than Lucas, with his father's strength and his mother's gentle heart. Lucas and Faith celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary on a golden September day. The children prepared a surprise picnic by the stream, and the whole family spent the afternoon in the sunshine, eating and laughing and telling stories. You remember the day I arrived? Faith asked, lying in the grass with her head on Lucas's shoulder. You were so angry. I was terrified, Lucas corrected. I thought you were going to turn my whole life upside down. I did turn your life upside down. Yes, Lucas agreed, kissing her temple, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Faith smiled, watching their children play together. James was teaching Lily how to skip stones while Samuel dodged back and forth, determined to join in. Tommy and Michael were wrestling near the trees, with Scout barking encouragement. Sarah sat reading in the shade, occasionally looking up to smile at her brother's antics. I never imagined my life would turn out like this, Faith said softly. When I stepped off that stagecoach with 3 frightened orphans and no idea what would happen next, I was so scared, but I knew somehow that everything would work out. You were braver than I was, Lucas said. You took a chance on a stranger, on a life you knew nothing about. You could have stayed in Philadelphia, found work, kept the children in an orphanage. That was not living, Faith said. This is living. This beautiful place, these beautiful children, this beautiful life we have built together. This is everything I never knew I wanted. Lucas pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. My cabin became a home the day you arrived. I told myself it was just a practical arrangement, a way to stop being so lonely. But the truth is, I fell in love with you the moment I saw you standing there with your chin up and your eyes blazing, ready to fight the whole world for those children. I would have fought the whole world, Faith said. For them, for you, for this family we made together. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Lucas looked around at his family and felt a peace he had never thought possible. The war seemed like a lifetime ago, a bad dream that had finally faded. The loneliness and pain that had driven him into the wilderness were distant memories, replaced by love and laughter and the daily chaos of a house full of children. He thought back to that first day, when the stagecoach had arrived and changed his life forever. He had told Jenkins the truth that morning in town, though he had not realized it at the time. His cabin had indeed been just a shelter, a place to survive. But when Faith stepped down from that stagecoach with 3 orphan children in tow, when she looked at him with those fierce blue eyes and refused to give up, his cabin had become a home. Not because of the building itself, though it had grown and changed over the years. Not because of the land, though it was beautiful and bountiful. His cabin became a home because it was filled with the people he loved, the family he had chosen and who had chosen him in return. Lucas pulled Faith to her feet and drew her into his arms, dancing slowly to music only they could hear. The children paused in their play to watch, smiling at the sight of their parents so clearly in love. "I would do it all again," Lucas murmured against Faith's hair. "Every moment, every challenge, every fear. I would do it all again for this." "So would I," Faith said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Every single moment." As darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one above the mountains, the Ingram family gathered around the campfire. Lucas told stories of his trapping adventures, making them funny and exciting for the younger children. Faith served the food she had packed, and everyone ate with hearty appetites earned from a day of fresh air and play. Tommy and Sarah helped settle the younger children when they grew sleepy, and Michael kept the fire burning bright. Finally, as the moon rose full and bright above the pine trees, they packed up and walked back to the cabin together. Scout trotted ahead, scouting the path. The younger children rode on Lucas's broad shoulders, already half asleep. Tommy and Michael carried the baskets and blankets. Sarah walked beside Faith, arm in arm, talking about the future, about dreams and hopes and possibilities. Inside the cabin, warm and welcoming with lantern light glowing in the windows, they settled everyone for bed. Lucas and Faith tucked in each child, listening to prayers and giving goodnight kisses. When everyone was finally asleep, they stood together in the main room, looking around at the home they had built. The rocking chair where Faith had nursed 5 babies sat by the fireplace. The table Lucas had made was scarred from years of family meals and homework and craft projects. Drawings and treasures decorated the walls, evidence of children loved and encouraged to be creative. Quilts Faith had sewn brightened the beds. Tools Lucas had crafted hung neatly in their places. Every object told a story. Every corner held a memory. This was not just a cabin in the mountains anymore. This was a home, full of life and love and laughter. This was a family, bound not just by blood but by choice and commitment and an unwavering devotion to each other. Lucas pulled Faith close, and she wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head over his heart. They stood like that for a long time, swaying slightly, neither of them needing to speak. Everything that needed to be said had been said, was said every day in 1,000 small ways. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. The stream sang its endless song. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called to its mate, and another answered. The mountains stood eternal and unchanging, witnesses to the seasons and the years, to the life unfolding in the small cabin nestled in their embrace. And in that cabin, a mountain man who had once been alone and broken held his wife and felt complete. A woman who had been lost and frightened stood in her husband's arms and felt found. Their children slept safely in their beds, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and wanted and would always belong. The Stagecoach bride had arrived with 3 orphans 10 years ago, seeking nothing more than survival and safety. The mountain man had reluctantly opened his door, expecting nothing more than an end to loneliness. Neither of them had imagined the depth of love that would grow between them, the family they would create, the home they would build. But as Lucas had said on that first day, though he had not fully understood his own words, his cabin had become a home. Not gradually, not slowly over time, but in that very first moment when Faith stepped down from the stagecoach with 3 frightened children and refused to give up on them. In that moment, everything changed. The cabin became a home, and Lucas became the man he was always meant to be, a husband. a father, a man who loved deeply and lived fully and finally, after so many years of merely surviving, truly thrived. And Faith, looking up at her husband's face in the soft lamplight, seeing the love and contentment there, knew that she had been right to take that desperate gamble so many years ago. The risk had been terrifying, the journey arduous, the future uncertain. But every step, every fear, every challenge had been worth it to arrive at this moment, in this place, with this man and this family. She had left Philadelphia as a woman with nothing. She had arrived in Sioux Falls as a mail-order bride with 3 orphan children and a heart full of hope. She had climbed into the mountains as a stranger seeking shelter, and she had become, over time and through love, exactly what she was always meant to be. A wife, a mother, and the heart of a home built not of logs and stone, but of devotion and commitment and the unbreakable bonds of family. As they finally made their way to bed, Lucas paused at each child's door, looking in on them. Faith watched him, this powerful, gentle man who had learned to love when he thought himself incapable of it, who had opened his isolated cabin and his guarded heart to a ready-made family, who had become the father figure 3 orphan children desperately needed, and the husband she had not dared dream of finding. In their room, they undressed and climbed into the bed Lucas had built, enlarged over the years to accommodate them both comfortably. Faith curled against Lucas's side and his arm came around her automatically, a gesture so familiar it required no thought. "I love you," Faith whispered into the darkness. "I love you," Lucas replied, his voice already heavy with sleep. "My brave, beautiful Faith, my home." And as sleep claimed them both, wrapped in each other's arms beneath quilts Faith had sewn, and in a bed Lucas had built, in a cabin that had become a home, they rested secure in the knowledge that they had found what every person seeks. They had found belonging. They had found purpose. They had found love, the stagecoach bride and the mountain man, brought together by circumstance and advertisement, had created something neither of them had possessed before. A family, a home, a love story that would endure through all the years to come, growing stronger with each passing season, each new challenge, each small joy. And in the morning they would wake together and begin another day, facing whatever it brought side by side, just as they always had and always would. Because that is what family does. That is what love means. That is what home is, not a place, but the people who fill it with life and laughter and light. Not a cabin in the mountains, but the hearts that beat within it, bound together by choice and commitment and an enduring, unshakable love. The end.